Well, time. Let's start the next part of this interesting afternoon, and welcome on the stage Andras Iklody and Sami Mokaddem, both from CIRCL in Luxembourg, and they've been working with the MISP project for a long time. Andras for almost a decade or something like that. Sami also for some years, we know them from that, but they have a new project, the Cerebrate project, which I, for one, am very interested to hear more about. I hope you are also. Let's welcome them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So, welcome everyone. So we're indeed here to talk to you about a new tool that we've been working on. So if you have been to the session this morning about MISP, you kind of got a teaser about what we're going to be talking about. So let's dive into it. A tiny bit about us, who we are. So we're basically both from CIRCL. We are basically the Luxembourgish CERT for the private sector. So we are funded by the Ministry of Economy, and our goal is, our mandate is basically to build security for the community at large. Now, being in this weird situation that we're in Luxembourg, a lot of companies are incorporated there, so our constituency is really broadly defined. So we are pretty open to the global community as we have basically in our constituency players from all around the world. We are also, besides being a CERT, developing quite a few open source tools. So indeed, MISP is one of the ones that we've been developing over the past decade. But there are also some other tools that we're working on, including what we're going to be talking about now, Cerebrate. So a quick recap of the session this morning. There is basically a project called MISP funded by the European Commission. Basically, the goal of this tooling is to build a common set of tooling and interactions for the different national CSIRTs in Europe. And we've been working on this project since 2020. And one of the core components of this project that we've developed from scratch is Cerebrate. So it came from this project, but it is not meant to be only part of this project. So we ourselves have our own selfish reasons. We want to make our own lives easier, so we mostly build tools that we also use ourselves as a CERT. So this basically solves several issues for us as well that we'll dive into. Basically, the main role that the tool takes in the MISP landscape is contact management, orchestration, and sharing group distribution and management.
Yeah, so these are some statistics of one of our MISP instances that we are running at CIRCL. So you can see on the left side the amount of data that we have to deal with. So we have millions of events and even more of attributes. All of this data is coming from a lot of different users belonging to other organizations and various types of organizations, as you can see on the right side. And if we look at how many organizations we gain every month, and even over time, you can see that we have a steady amount of a new organization starting to use the project, or being connected to our instance, or just reusing the platform again and again. So on the blue bar, or the created organization, these are the ones that ask to have access to our instance. And on the yellow one, these are actually organizations that don't have access to our instance, but we know from synchronization nodes. So you can see that it's becoming more and more organizations that we have to deal with.
So basically, having a lot of communities is great. So obviously, we're happy to be part of many communities and to exchange with many communities. It helps our day-to-day work. But basically, this also comes with its own issues. I mean, the advantages are obvious. We basically interconnect communities that already had really strong sharing practices in place with other ones, so that we have this overlap of information, so we can be informed about trends that others are facing faster. So this is one of the main advantages. We're seeing the reuse of TTPs, reuse of the different tools by attackers in these different communities. We also see Hybrid threats being cross-correlated. So very often, if you're coming from a financial fraud background, for example, you're going to see an overlap, for example, with a lot of the ransomware, CEO fraud, and so on cases that we're dealing with. So sometimes the correlations are not purely on technical data points, but really on these interconnections between similar things happening at the same time. Finally, one of the reasons why we also want to be inclusive in these communities is we are in a really beneficial position. We're all from IT backgrounds, so we obviously can build our own tools more easily than other sectors since we are all IT professionals. So we want to just spread the love also to other communities and to get more involvement also from other sectors out there. So with this in mind, with these advantages, it also means that a more diverse and larger community can also create more types of issues to solve. I mean, the biggest one being social interactions and lack of trust. This is why communities like FIRST are so great, because you get to meet and interact with people and solve the biggest hurdle in information sharing altogether, which is really the trust aspect. You gain a lot of points of contact, and very often the sharing still relies on personal trust rather than just organizational rules. There are also some technical issues that we have to overcome. For example, one of the ones that we've learned with MISP that was becoming tricky was identity management. Sami has already mentioned a large growing set of organizations being able to validate data as sources, who those organizations actually are, and having a community-centric approach of managing this was something that we were missing in MISP. So this is still an unresolved issue, and we want to basically solve this issue. We also have to deal, I mean, for those of you that are using MISP, for example, things like organization UUID management and so on are tricky over time if you're dealing with larger and larger communities. So this is really one of the hurdles that we're trying to overcome.
In addition to all of these issues, when you have to deal with a community, you want to be also able to know the constituency of this organization. So in addition to having like a standard data point that you can save on organizations such as, I don't know, the name of the company, the point of contact of the company, the contact email address, and so on, we also wanted to be able to keep information about, as it says, the constituency, especially looking at some non-really technical pointers, such as the geographic location, so for the country, the region, and so on, but also the sector, like is it the financial sector, the telecommunication sector, and so on. But on the technical side, we also want to be able to know, for example, for the CIDR blocks, if an IP address, who should we contact for an abuse report, for example, or same for an IS number. So we wanted to take these different type of data points that are of different type. Of course, we have some free text. We also have some IP addresses that we want to enforce as a format, and we want them to save this. In addition to that, we have also the cryptographic key lookup for information signing. And if you share information, sometimes you want to make sure that this information is coming from the correct sender. And so in MISP, we have implemented a mechanism that is called the protected event feature that is fairly new, not a few versions ago. And yeah, so just a small teaser. So if you want to learn more about this feature, just feel free to come to the MISP workshop that we have on Thursday. So in addition to this geographic, sectorial, and technical data such as IP addresses and NICE number and so on, we also wanted to make sure every type of community, because of the sheer amount of the different type of community that we have, is able to save their own model. So by that, well, what you will also see that later on in this presentation. But based on specific templating system that you may have in your organization, you will be able to save all of this information in Cerebrate so that you don't have to conform to our format and how we designed the application. Sharing group management, Andras already mentioned the issue. This is really something that we want to tackle and make it as easy as possible for anyone to create distribution lists and also obviously to share them. And synchronization, we at CIRCL, we love synchronization, we love information sharing. So of course, we also wanted to make sure that it is as easy as possible for everyone to create information and then share it with partners. And look at system, it's a bit similar to synchronization, but yeah.
So a little bit about what we try to do in the end, so what our solution to these issues are. So we started this working on Cerebrate about 2 years ago. It is now deployed in several places, including for the CSIRT network, which is currently in pilot phase. The idea was that basically it's a rich contact database, so it contains information about organizations, about individuals, and all the metadata that Sami hinted at. As well as being tightly coupled to other tools that we use. So we have an integration layer that we're going to talk about that allows us to interconnect Cerebrate with other tools such as MISP, but also other ones. It's easy to define your own, so we'll look at that in a moment. But the idea is that you can build your own integrations rather easily. So besides that, obviously, us wearing 2 hats with MISP and Cerebrate at the same time, we wanted to make use of this tool for MISP itself. So it is becoming the de facto fleet management tool for MISPs. If you're a power user of MISP, you probably end up in a situation very often where you are running multiple MISP instances, and managing multiple for different communities, different use cases can be a hassle. So that means you have to log into each of those admin interfaces, you need to modify all those settings, add users, and so on. So all these basic things become a hassle the more instances you have. We want to centralize this with Cerebrate and have a single tool that manages this.
Yeah. Even though we had MISP in mind, we really wanted to have a modular system, as you will see later on, so that any other tools that you have, you will be able to also integrate it with Cerebrate and also perform fleet management.
Yeah, exactly. So it's our first target for it, but we also have ideas about our other tools that we want to integrate ourselves to make our lives easier, so indeed. And the idea is that everyone should be able to do that. As for the technology used behind it, it is very similar to MISP with the differentiation that it's using a much more modern version of the stack. That is obviously kind of dual purpose. So first of all, we wanted to move to something more modern. The other thing is we wanted to be able to transition MISP slowly to the more modern stack as well. So we use this also as a vehicle. We're converging the developments of the 2 tools. They're already sharing a lot of the code base, which makes it easier for us to align the 2 tools and finally also to move MISP over to the same design. One of the approaches also that we had during the entire development was to build Cerebrate to be a central node for a community also for the IAM part. So that means for the identity management part. So it is tightly integrated or built to be integrated with IAM systems. We've already integrated with Keycloak. We're also planning to open this up to other ones in the future. The idea is that Cerebrate can be the authoritative interface to manage Keycloak. The good thing with that is that you can assign roles for community members to manage their own teams directly through Cerebrate without giving them access to the IAM directly. So it already filters what they can do and makes it a lot more easy and convenient for a community. Some other core functionalities, but we will not go into much detail for it. So if you've used MISP before, you'll see that we have a very API-centric approach to building our tools. It's the same here. So if you want to build automation with Cerebrate, it's just as simple as with MISP. Everything you can do in the interface is API exposed. It's all documented via OpenAPI, so it should be rather easy to get started with it.
Yep, and that brings us exactly to this point. Cerebrate was built around, having API in mind. So what you are currently seeing as a screenshot is actually an integration of Cerebrate in MISP. Obviously, that's the first integration we did because we are developing both these 2 tools. So if you're not really familiar with this interface, which is also quite new compared to the whole lifespan of MISP, what you're looking at is MISP queried a Cerebrate node and got the list of organizations that are stored on that Cerebrate instance. And so you can see, I hope, at least with the color on the left side, the status, saying that MISP knows about a specific organization, or that the organization on the Cerebrate instance is more complete or has the latest data. And the last one, the check mark, basically means that the two data are aligned for this organization. And from MISP, so you are able to query a Cerebrate instance, and obviously you are also able to save this information data into your MISP instance. So this is for organization, but also for sharing groups. Yeah, so how does Cerebrate fit in all of these various local tools? So I will start with the top of the diagram, where you have a Cerebrate node, which has information about contact database, such as individuals, organizations, sharing groups, distribution lists as trust circles. And then we have, at the bottom, this orchestration interface, which can interact and interact with different local tools. And the symbols on the icons on the bottom are what we call local tools. So basically tools that you run as a CIRCL that helps you do your daily task. So for example, MISP, Intel MQ, or ticketing systems such as the Hive or RTRR from Best Practical. And really the idea is that you have Cerebrate that provides information about all of this contact information, but also can play a bit with these tools, as you will see in a few slides.
So here's a small example of what the contact database looks like. So if you're familiar with MISP, you will find that the layout is very similar. So we're kind of trying to have the same look and feel, even though it's a more modern coating. But basically the idea is that, when what Sami mentioned with the custom data formats, what you see here, on top you see the basic fields that are coming from Cerebrate itself. So those are the data points that we identified are crucial for describing an organization. And everything below is coming from specific libraries or custom libraries that align with what certain communities use. So here you see, for example, we have an ESA CSIRT network mapping. We also have mapping for first data set of organizations, also for, I think TFC CIRT we have one as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Could be.
Yeah, basically we're trying to build out these different data models to capture all the different data points that these repositories of information have already. The idea is that if you have a national level contact database that you want to move to Cerebrate, you should be able to map it by creating your own mapping for it and your own data points. And the interesting thing is that a lot of those data points are type aware. So that means that what Sami has already mentioned, for example, with CIDR lookups, you can create in the template CIDR fields or other types of meta fields that will then have special search algorithms attached to it when you're doing searches against your data set. So that should make your life quite a bit easier. So this is basically what an organization index looks like in the end. So it's rather straightforward. If you know how MISP works, you're familiar with it. The one big change here is you can customize also what you display on each of the indexes. So, for example, one of the things that for first members in the first community would be interesting would be to show the status within first for each of the teams. So that would be one of the fields that you would probably want to have on your index in your community. But with the same data set shared with another community, they might be interested in different data points. So this is all configurable per user and per instance.
Yeah, so that's exactly what Andras explained. But not to go into the details, you basically have the abilities to save your custom information into what we call meta templates, which can be defined for the different type of entities, like Andras mentioned the first directory, the INISA CSIRT directory, and for IP CIDR blocks, IS numbers, the one that we call CSIRT constituency. And this is a screenshot of the first directory, that what it would look like in Cerebrate. Yeah, this is the index of the meta template, where you can see the details of what you can use, what type of field you can use using a specific meta template, so in this case the first one. And just to show that this system is really flexible, the way you can create meta template is fairly easy. You just describe it as a JSON file and then save it into a directory, the installation directory of Cerebrate, basically. And then you just load it by clicking one button, and Cerebrate is aware of it, and you can use it right away.
So a little bit about the sharing group management. So one of the things that we really struggled with MISP, especially if you're part of any of those larger communities that have a lot of sensitive sharing going on where you really want to define who you're sharing information with. One of the tricky things is you create a sharing group and you still need to inform the other parties of that sharing group so that they can reuse it and start sharing back information with you. In MISP, the way this works is that, that this entire process is coupled with the data sharing itself. So I need to share data in a sharing group for the sharing group to propagate. This was a hurdle because we ended up with duplications of efforts. People were creating the same sharing group, the same concept, as different sharing group entities on their own instances, and then sharing data back and forth, which led to a mess. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to have an authoritative figure manage the sharing groups for communities to use. For example, we're part of, we're operating communities for GSMA operators, where basically the idea is also that they want to be able to create certain sharing groups based on their membership levels. This is something that is created by the central authority of the community, but they have no way of propagating the sharing groups out so that everyone reuses those. So this is one of the issues that we wanted to move to Cerebrate, basically. And this is what it basically looks like in practice. So it's, if you know how it works in MISP, it's basically the same idea. You want?
Yeah.
Yep, sure.
But this one was already kind of presented
Yep.
in a way that you are able to store information about the organization, sharing group, but at that point it would also make sense to store information about cryptographic key so that you are also able to use the system to make data signing and validation. And that's also kind of a teaser for the misprotected event feature.
Yeah, one of the tricky things here is we're not just talking about personal signing keys, also system signing keys. And the lookup of those is generally quite tricky because they're not tied to the same email address of a contact that you know and so on. So managing these is trickier unless you have a central node for the community. This is basically what it looks like in Cerebrate.
So you have access to all of this information, but sometimes, well, right now in Cerebrate we have authentication to access this information, but sometimes you want this information to be available to everyone because, well, for example, the first one, it's public, so it would make sense to having this information public in Cerebrate too. So we created a system where you can also specify them specific indexes, such as the organization index, would be public, and that would allow other tools, such as MISP, for example, or even another Cerebrate node, actually, to connect to this public index or open directory and fetch this information, or even visualize it with the user interface. So, yeah.
The idea is really to also create trusted nodes for public use as well. So we as CIRCL will run our own node that will be a publicly trusted node where if anyone wants to validate an organization, their signing keys and so on, they can do it on our repository. So if we contain their data, then they can do a lookup against our instance. And we encourage communities to run these for as open directories in general. So for the sharing aspect itself, it works very similarly to MISP. So we can interconnect with other Cerebrate nodes and we can exchange information with them. So that means that we can preview data, we can diagnose connectivity issues and so on, and we can remotely browse and cherry pick data that we're interested in or just bulk import the data that they have.
And we have screenshots for that.
So. Yeah. So it's very straightforward. Again, if you've ever used MISP before, it should be something that you recognize immediately. Okay. So for the synchronization part, something else that is slightly different than MISP is that we want to build it, so this is not yet done, but this is coming in an upcoming version. We want to have two ways of trusting another community. So there are standard synchronization connections and trusted connections. Trusted connections can be used to update data that you already have, while standard connections only feed you new data. The idea behind that is that if you have an authoritative source in a community, such as a first instance would be, for example, then all the members of the community would inherently trust the data coming from first for the contact database. They could receive other data from their constituents, but it would never update or change anything that is coming from the first database. Okay. You want to? I can do it.
But the thing is, we are kind of running out of
time.
So maybe we can just skip because it's kind of repeating and introducing the next one, where basically what we want to say in these 2 slides, it's basically we design a system to integrate. So we've mentioned a lot of time integration with MISP because obviously that's what we really wanted to have in Cerebrate as at the first place. But all these integration with local tools, we made it so that it's easy for everyone to also integrate their own tools. So you can also, similar to the meta template system, drop files, but that time it would not be JSON, but it would be PHP file because Cerebrate is written in PHP. But it's fairly easy to use helper function that we design to interconnect, create interface inside Cerebrate for your local tool, and also manipulate your local tools using Cerebrate, as you will see an example for MISP. So in that case, this is some example of what Cerebrate can already do using the MISP connector in Cerebrate, where you can configure a MISP instance. You can also fetch sharing group and organization, diagnose your MISP instance using just the connection test, and also manage user. This is what it looks like in Cerebrate, where we are actually here viewing the igloshka.eu MISP instance and browsing the organization that it has. And you can see on the right side that we can also download this organization.
Okay, sorry. Good.
So we have this capability to manipulate one MISP instance or one local tool. So why stop there? So why not just continue and made it so that we can manipulate multiple at the same time? And that's why we did this fleet management system for local tools, as it's already implemented in MISP because that's the only tool that supports it right now. But you can see on the next slides that you have the MISP connector, and on the right side you have the connection that are instantiated using this connector. And for that one, you can see that you can manipulate already 3 MISP instances at the same time.
Yeah, so basically what Sami has mentioned with this, one of our goals with this is to ease the community management part. So that means that you can basically choose which of the local tools you want to expose to the community. For example, I have a MISP running, I have perhaps a ticketing system, something else running that I want to share with the community and say, you can ask for connection requests to this tool. I make it available to you. So you don't have to share all your MISP instances, all your other tools, but the ones that you want to expose are then visible to the community. And then the community members can ask for interconnection requests to these individual tools and open an interconnection request. So these interconnection requests then follow a 3-way handshake. So that means that the tool itself will basically go through this process of sending a request to the other Cerebrate node. My dear, could you provide me with access to your MISP instance? And yeah, it will be my pleasure. Here you go, that's the second phase. And finally, the connection is accepted and finalized on both sides. And then the connection is already there. So if you've ever set up synchronization links between MISP instances, it can be a hassle. And things can go wrong. And the idea is to take over this task. The integration layer takes care of it. So if you want to have tool-to-tool integration with your tools, you can take over this task and add safeguards in there so that users don't mess up their interconnection requests.
This is what it looks like actually in Cerebrate, not using a meme. But you can see that this is a message that one Cerebrate would receive on the receiving side. So at that stage, a Cerebrate node already sent an interconnection request, and the second Cerebrate is currently viewing the initial request that was sent, and he can decide to either accept it and then proceed to the interconnection of his MISP instance, or to decline the request, and it will stop there.
So some other things, just a quick listing of what else Cerebrate does or will do in the future. Mailing list management is also already implemented. So the idea is that we have all this information about individuals and so on. We want to be able to create mailing lists and push it to other tools so that we can start interacting with them instead of having to retype everything in all those different tools that we would use for it. It is a strong ACL system that is configurable. And again, configurable together with an IAM system. It has an inbox system that allows you to send messages between the different Cerebrate nodes, for example, for connection requests, but also for other tools. We are making everything labelable in the tool, which helps with filtering and searching and so on. So you can even, for example, in a community, label individuals with their various skills. Who does have these capabilities? Who can I contact if I have questions about this tool, about this technique? So you can include all of this information directly in there. Besides that, the rest is not that interesting. This one, and for the MISP users, this is a really painful thing, and we hope that we can get this also over to MISP. The whole thing is themable and customizable. I know it's a small thing, but the number of requests we get for this on MISP is crazy. And currently what we have on the roadmap, we basically want to have full-blown data signing. So this is something we're working on for MISP. And the idea is also to incorporate Cerebrate as the key distribution vehicle for this, for communities. So right now, the data signing that Sami has mentioned is more in the connection layer itself, but we want to have full-blown data signing and validation coming to MISP as well in the near future. Other than that, we want to integrate it with more tools. So this is, right now the framework is there, the system is there, it works. It has some integrations, but very few. We want to go way beyond that and extend it with a bunch of different other tools like the ones listed on there. That's basically it. If you want to integrate Cerebrate in your tool, get in touch with us or go to GitHub. If you want to have a live demo, get in touch again, so we can help you there. And if you want to suggest any features, if you have ideas for integrations or something that is missing, also get in touch with us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation of this new tool. I'm looking forward to using it, actually. Any questions from the audience? We have a microphone over there and another over here. Feel free to come up and ask questions to Andras and Sami. Yes, Vilius?
I want to ask about templating. Does it allow to assign multiple IP ranges as well? Maybe it can be extended with URLs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the default templates that we already have in there for the different ones already allow multiple IP addresses, IP ranges, and so on. And if you want to extend it with other data points like URLs, we had AS numbers, for example, as one of the ones that we want in there. Absolutely, it's really easy to do. So it's just editing a JSON file. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Other questions?
Yeah, hi. We have our own contact database, and you said you can integrate with like the first contact database and things like that. But what kind of form can I take the my database and move it over to Cerebrate?
Okay, so what format did you say?
Like what kind of form are you expecting to be able to move
Right.
our own database into Cerebrate?
Right. I mean, Cerebrate, there are two ways of doing it. So one would indeed be to just export it in a format and feed it to Cerebrate. The other is Cerebrate also has an ingestion mechanism. So you can write easily scripts that will query other tools for data. That's what we did, for example, with the first API or the Anise API and so on. So generally, that's the way we would do it, is we would map the data not to Cerebrate, but from Cerebrate to the other one and pull the data in. So we have some good examples on how to do it, and it's rather straightforward. Okay. So, yeah.
And it also supports CSV.
Yeah, okay.
In addition to the JSON, obviously. But sometimes, well, it's the most common use format for information sharing.
Yeah. We have room for a question or two more. No one? Yes, we'll go back home and integrate with our MISP and with Mattermost and Mailman and everything. That's a very interesting perspective, I think, for our toolbox at home. So let's all give Andras and Sami a warm applause for this. Thank you very much. And next up on the agenda is coffee, or tea if you prefer, downstairs.